Finding your own way. Reflections on high control groups, personal autonomy, and the wisdom of distance. I spent years navigating high control and closed groups from the inside, not as an observer, not as a researcher, but as a participant, fully immersed in the culture, the expectations, the social pressures, and the belief systems that held everything together. At the time, much of what surrounded me felt normal. Some of it felt necessary. Some of it even felt virtuous. It wasn't until years after leaving that I began to see things differently. Distance does something that argument never can. It creates space for honest reflection, not the kind shaped by group consensus, but the kind that emerges quietly, when you are no longer surrounded by voices telling you what to think. What once appeared as guidance began to look more like control. What once felt like community began to reveal itself as something more conditional. These realizations didn't arrive all at once. They came slowly, in layers, the way most genuine understanding does. The warrior knows when not to fight. In martial philosophy, one of the harder lessons is learning which battles are not yours to wage. The warrior does not engage every conflict simply because he is capable of doing so. Discernment, or knowing when to act and when to stand aside, is itself a form of mastery. I learned this the hard way when it came to people still inside the groups I had left. For a time, I believed that sharing what I had seen, what I had experienced, and what I had come to understand would somehow be enough to open another person's eyes. It wasn't. Human beings do not abandon deeply held beliefs, social identities, long-standing friendships, or community belonging simply because someone on the outside presents them with a different perspective. If anything, unsolicited persuasion tends to do the opposite. It pushes people deeper in. The warrior eventually learns that some doors can only be opened from the inside. Culture or cult? The question itself deserves humility. Here's something worth sitting with. The line between what we call a culture and what we call a cult is rarely as clear as critics or defenders would like to believe. There may well be objective indicators worth examining, such as coercive control, exploitation, manipulation, the systematic suppression of critical thinking. Those things are real and they matter. But individuals within any group experience that group differently. What one person finds restrictive, another finds stabilizing. What one person experiences as control, another experiences as guidance. What looks like isolation from the outside may feel like belonging from within. Who am I, or who is anyone, to draw that line definitively for another person? The scholar in me wants to analyze, categorize, and conclude. But the longer I have lived, the more I appreciate that human experience does not submit neatly to outside analysis. People are not waiting to be correctly classified. They are living out their own stories, shaped by their own histories, values, and needs. Autonomy is not indifference. Recognizing that I cannot and should not direct another person's choices does not mean turning a blind eye to harm. There's a meaningful difference between respecting autonomy and practicing indifference. If someone asks about my experiences, I will share them, honestly. If someone expresses doubts or seeks perspective, I am willing to offer what I have learned through years of involvement and subsequent reflection. Questions that encourage critical thinking have genuine value. Listening when someone is ready to talk has even more. But there is a significant difference between making yourself available and appointing yourself as someone else's liberator. The first respects the other person. The second, however well-intentioned, does not. The sage understands that sustainable transformation rarely arrives through force or persuasion. It arrives when an individual reaches their own conclusions through lived experience, honest reflection, and the gradual development of personal discernment. What discernment actually looks like? Discernment is the capacity to evaluate information honestly, examine your own assumptions, and make decisions that align with your actual values, not the values you have been told to hold. It is not something that can be handed to another person. It is cultivated over time, through experience, through difficulty, and sometimes through loss. My role as an educator and as someone who has walked this particular road is not to replace one authority with another. It is not to swap one belief system for a competing belief system. It is simply to help people think for themselves and then to respect whatever conclusions they reach. Some individuals who remain within high control groups will eventually find their way out when the time is right for them. Others may conclude that remaining serves their needs. Both of those outcomes are theirs to own. Neither belongs to me. A final thought. Perhaps the deepest lesson I have taken from all of this is not about high control groups at all. It is about the nature of change itself. Real change that is lasting and meaningful does not come from the outside in. It comes from the inside out. It comes when a person is ready, when their own experience has prepared them, and when their own moral compass points them toward a new direction. Until that moment arrives for someone, the most honest and respectful thing any of us can offer is this: our experience when it is asked for, our perspective without force, and our genuine respect for another person's right to find their own way forward.